London, 1847. The rain pattered against the window of Sophia Beaufort's bedchamber as her lady's maid fastened the last pearl button of her wedding gown. The ivory silk rustled softly as she turned to examine herself in the looking-glass. At 20 years of age, with chestnut curls framing a heart-shaped face and eyes the color of warm amber, she was indeed a vision in white. Yet the reflection that stared back at her showed no joy, only resignation. "You look beautiful, Miss Sophia," her maid whispered, arranging the delicate veil over her shoulders. "Thank you, Mary," Sophia replied, forcing a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Though I believe you should address me as Your Grace after today." Her father's voice echoed from downstairs. "Sophia, the carriages have arrived." With a deep breath, she gathered her skirts and descended the staircase of Beaufort House, once grand, now showing subtle signs of neglect that only the most discerning eye might notice. Lord Thomas Beaufort awaited at the bottom, his shoulders slightly stooped under the weight of financial ruin that had befallen their once prosperous family. "My dear girl," he said, his voice catching, "you are the image of your mother." "Father, please," Sophia whispered, adjusting her gloves. "Let us not pretend this day is anything but what it is, a transaction." Lord Beaufort's face fell. "Sophia, the Duke of Westmore is a good match, the best match in England. Any young lady would sacrifice herself for his title and fortune," Sophia finished, immediately regretting her sharpness. "Forgive me, Father. I know you had no choice." The journey to St. George's Church in Hanover Square passed in silence. Through the carriage window, Sophia watched London's fashionable streets slip by, mansions of cream-coloured stone, iron fences, and carefully manicured gardens. The city bustled with horse-drawn carriages, gentlemen in top hats, and ladies with parasols, all unaware that she was travelling toward a life sentence. The church loomed ahead, its neoclassical facade imposing against the grey spring sky. A crowd had gathered, eager to witness the social event of the season, the marriage of Henry Lancaster, the Duke of Westmore, London's most eligible bachelor, to the daughter of an impoverished viscount. "Courage, my dear," her father whispered as footmen opened the carriage door. Inside the church, hundreds of candles illuminated the solemn space. Sophia clutched her father's arm as they stood at the entrance, the assembled aristocracy of England turning to witness her arrival. At the altar stood a tall figure, broad-shouldered and imposing in formal black attire. As she walked down the aisle on her father's arm, whispers rippled through the congregation. She kept her eyes fixed on the stone floor, unable to look at the man who was to be her husband, a man she had met only twice, both times in the company of lawyers discussing settlements and contracts. When she finally reached the altar and dared to glance up, her breath caught. Henry Lancaster, the 8th Duke of Westmore, was undeniably handsome, devastatingly so, with sharp aristocratic features, raven-black hair, and eyes the colour of a winter sea. But it was the coldness in those eyes that made her shiver beneath her gown. "Dearly beloved," the bishop began, his voice echoing through the cavernous church. The ceremony passed in a blur. Sophia spoke her vows mechanically, promising to love and honour a stranger. When the Duke slipped a heavy gold ring onto her finger, his touch was impersonal, as if he were merely signing a document. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the bishop declared finally. "Your Grace, you may kiss your bride." The Duke leaned forward, and for a brief moment his eyes met hers. Something flickered there, not warmth but perhaps a momentary curiosity. His lips brushed against hers in the lightest of touches, formal and proper, lasting barely a second before he withdrew. The reception at Westmore House was lavish, crystal chandeliers, mountains of hothouse flowers, and an orchestra playing gentle waltzes. The Duke performed his duties as host with practiced precision, yet barely acknowledged his new wife beyond what propriety demanded. As evening fell and the guests departed, Sophia found herself standing alone in an opulent bedchamber, surrounded by her belongings that had been delivered earlier. A fire crackled in the marble hearth, and the bed, massive and draped in crimson velvet, dominated the room. The door opened, and she turned, heart hammering against her ribs. The Duke entered, still in his formal attire, though he had removed his white gloves. Without preamble, he poured himself a glass of brandy from a crystal decanter. "Your Grace," Sophia said, forcing herself to meet his gaze. I hope our union may grow to be amicable at least." The Duke regarded her silently, his expression unreadable. Then he drained his glass and set it down carefully. "Lady Westmore," he said, using her new title for the first time. His voice was deep and cultured, with the precise diction of a man accustomed to command. "Let us be clear about our arrangement. This marriage fulfills certain obligations for us both. You gain a title and financial security. I satisfy the requirements of my station to take a wife." He moved toward the door, then paused, his hand on the ornate brass handle. "You will spend the wedding night alone, and every night thereafter. I have no interest in a true marriage. Good evening." With that, he was gone, leaving Sophia standing in the middle of the room, her wedding dress suddenly feeling as heavy as the realization that she had married a man whose heart was as cold as the winter outside. Alone in the vast bedchamber, she finally allowed her tears to fall. 3 months had passed since the wedding, and Sophia had quickly learned the rhythms of life as the Duchess of Westmore. Her days were filled with social calls, charity committees, and the management of the Duke's 3 residences: Westmore House in London, the country estate in Hampshire, and the hunting lodge in Scotland. Despite sharing a household, she rarely saw her husband. The Duke rose early and retired late, filling his days with Parliament, his clubs, and business matters. When their paths did cross at dinner or social functions, he was unfailingly polite but distant, treating her more as a particularly efficient housekeeper than a wife. London's summer season was in full swing, and tonight they were to attend Lady Hartington's ball. Sophia sat at her dressing table as her lady's maid arranged her hair in an elegant chignon, adorned with pearl pins. "The sapphire necklace, Your Grace?" the maid asked, opening a velvet box containing one of the many Westmore family jewels now at Sophia's disposal. "Yes, thank you, Ellis." Sophia touched the magnificent blue stones that matched her gown of midnight silk. These treasures should have delighted her, yet they felt like gilded chains. A knock at the door announced the arrival of a footman bearing a note. Sophia broke the seal to find her husband's precise handwriting. "I shall meet you directly at Hartington House. Do not wait. Westmore." "Will there be a reply, Your Grace?" the footman asked. "No," Sophia said softly. "No reply necessary." Later, as her carriage rolled through Mayfair toward the ball, Sophia steeled herself for another evening of performance, smiling graciously while weathering pitying glances and whispered gossip about her marriage of convenience to London's most desired duke. Hartington House blazed with light. Carriages lined up along the circular drive. As she ascended the marble staircase, Sophia noted the subtle shift in the crowd's reaction. Curtsies a fraction deeper, smiles a touch more ingratiating. Not for her, she knew, but for the title she now carried. "Her Grace the Duchess of Westmore," the butler announced as she entered the ballroom. The Duke was nowhere to be seen. Sophia made her way through the crowd, exchanging pleasantries and accepting congratulations that still came months after the wedding. "Your Grace," Lady Caroline Blackwood greeted her with a kiss on both cheeks. At 30, the widow was one of the few women in society who treated Sophia with genuine warmth. "You look positively radiant. Marriage clearly agrees with you." Sophia managed a smile. "You're too kind, Lady Caroline." "And where is your illustrious husband this evening?" "He is to meet me here," Sophia replied, scanning the room, "though I confess I do not see him yet." Lady Caroline linked her arm through Sophia's. "Then you must allow me to introduce you to some friends while you wait. Come." As they circulated through the ballroom, Sophia finally spotted her husband across the room, deep in conversation with the Earl of Montclair. Even from a distance, the Duke commanded attention, his tall figure impeccably dressed, his bearing regal without effort. "Ah, there he is," Lady Caroline said, following Sophia's gaze. "Still the most handsome man in London, wouldn't you agree?" "Every unmarried lady is green with envy, my dear." If only they knew, Sophia thought, but merely smiled in response. The orchestra struck up a waltz, and couples began to fill the dance floor. Sophia watched from the sidelines, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing footman. "Your Grace." The deep voice behind her made her start. She turned to find her husband standing there, one eyebrow slightly raised. "I believe this is our dance." Without waiting for her response, he extended his hand. Sophia placed her fingers in his, feeling the unexpected warmth of his touch. He led her onto the floor, placing his other hand at her waist with perfect propriety. "I did not expect you to claim a dance, Your Grace," she said as they began to move with the music. "Appearances must be maintained," he replied, guiding her through a turn with effortless skill. "We have been married 3 months. People would talk if we did not dance at least once." "Heaven forbid there should be talk," Sophia murmured. Something that might have been amusement flickered in his eyes. "You disapprove of society's expectations, Duchess. I merely find it ironic that we must pretend to be a happy couple in public, when in private we are barely acquaintances." The Duke's jaw tightened, but his steps never faltered. "You knew the nature of our arrangement before the wedding." "Did I?" Sophia challenged, emboldened by the privacy afforded by the crowded dance floor. "I knew it was a marriage of convenience, yes, but I did not expect such complete indifference." For a moment, she thought she had gone too far. The Duke's expression darkened, and his grip on her waist tightened imperceptibly. "Indifference is preferable to the alternatives, I assure you," he said finally, his voice low. Before Sophia could ask what he meant, the music ended. The Duke bowed formally, then escorted her from the floor. As they reached the edge of the ballroom, a commotion near the entrance caught their attention. A disheveled man, clearly intoxicated and dressed in the uniform of an army officer, was arguing loudly with the butler. "I tell you I must speak with the Duke," the man insisted, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "It's a matter of life and death." The music faltered, and conversations died as heads turned toward the disturbance. Sophia felt her husband stiffen beside her. "Stay here," he commanded, then strode across the room. As he approached, the officer spotted him. "Westmore, there you are, you heartless bastard." The Duke reached the man and spoke in a low, intense voice that Sophia couldn't hear. Whatever he said only seemed to enrage the officer further. "You think your money and title can wash away what you did," the man shouted. "My brother is dead because of you." Gasps rippled through the assembled guests. The Duke grabbed the officer's arm and forcibly led him from the ballroom, disappearing into a side room. Lady Caroline appeared at Sophia's side. "My goodness," she whispered. "Captain Thomas Blackwood, my late husband's cousin. He served with the Duke in the army years ago." "The Duke was in the army?" Sophia asked, surprised. This was news to her. "Oh, yes, before he inherited the title. Quite the hero by all accounts, though he never speaks of it." Lady Caroline's expression grew troubled. "There was some terrible business in India. Richard, my husband, would never discuss the details." Sophia stared at the door through which her husband had disappeared. "What happened in India?" "I don't know precisely, but whatever it was, it changed the Duke profoundly. Richard said that before India, Henry Lancaster was a different man entirely. Warm, idealistic even. The man who returned was—" Lady Caroline hesitated. "Cold," Sophia finished. "Reserved." "Precisely." Lady Caroline squeezed her hand. "My dear, perhaps there is more to your husband than meets the eye." The side door opened, and the Duke emerged alone, his expression composed though a muscle worked in his jaw. He crossed the ballroom, nodding apologetically to their host, before returning to Sophia's side. "We are leaving," he said quietly but firmly. In the carriage, Sophia waited for him to speak, but he stared silently out the window, his profile sharp against the darkness. "Who was that man?" she finally asked. "What did he mean about his brother?" The Duke's gaze remained fixed on the passing streets. "It is not your concern." "I believe it is," Sophia insisted. "I am your wife, if only in name. Whatever affects you affects me as well." He turned to her then, his eyes cold. "You are my wife on paper, Duchess. That gives you no right to my past or my private affairs." "Then what rights do I have in this marriage?" Sophia demanded, her patience finally snapping. "To wear your jewels? To preside over your dinner table? To be paraded before society as proof of your respectability, while you treat me as nothing more than a convenient ornament?" The Duke stared at her, seemingly taken aback by her outburst. For a moment, something like admiration crossed his features. "You have spirit, Duchess. I had not expected that." "There is much about me you have not troubled yourself to learn, Your Grace." The carriage pulled up to Westmore House, ending their conversation. The Duke helped her descend, his touch impersonal once more. In the grand entrance hall, he paused at the foot of the staircase. "Captain Blackwood is a troubled man who blames others for his misfortunes," he said abruptly. Pay his accusations no mind. Is that all you have to say? Sophia asked. The Duke hesitated, and for a brief moment, Sophia glimpsed something vulnerable in his expression. A crack in the perfect facade. Good night, Sophia, he said, using her given name for the first time since their wedding day. Then he turned and walked away, leaving her with more questions than answers about the man she had married. Later that night, unable to sleep, Sophia wandered the silent corridors of Westmore House. The ancestral paintings of previous dukes stared down at her, their eyes seeming to follow her progress through the grand gallery. A light beneath a door caught her attention. The Duke's study. She hesitated, then heard the sound of glass breaking from within. Concerned, she knocked lightly. "Go away," came the curt response. Instead, Sophia turned the handle and entered. The study was a masculine space, leather-bound books, heavy furniture, and the scent of tobacco. A fire burned low in the grate. The Duke stood by the window, a glass of whiskey in hand. On the floor lay the shattered remains of another. "I said go away," he repeated without turning. "Are you hurt?" Sophia asked, eyeing the broken glass. "Only my pride," he replied bitterly. "An infrequent but unpleasant experience." She moved to a side table where a decanter and clean glasses stood. Pouring a measure of amber liquid, she approached him cautiously, offering the fresh glass. He accepted it with a raised eyebrow. "Do you make a habit of providing spirits to men in dark moods, Duchess?" "Only to husbands who look as though they need them," she replied. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. He gestured to a leather chair, and after a moment's hesitation, Sophia sat. To her surprise, he took the chair opposite, rather than dismissing her. "Captain Blackwood's brother served under my command in India," he said suddenly. "Lieutenant James Blackwood, a good soldier. He died during a skirmish with rebels in 43. Sophia remained silent, afraid that any response might cause him to withdraw again. "The captain believes I could have prevented his brother's death." The Duke stared into his glass. "Perhaps he is right. Is that why you left the army?" Sophia asked gently. He looked up, surprise evident in his expression. "You know about my military service?" "Very little," she admitted. "Lady Caroline mentioned it tonight. She said you were considered quite heroic." The Duke laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "Heroic. Yes, that's the story told in London drawing rooms. The truth is considerably less flattering." He fell silent again, and Sophia thought he would say no more. But then he continued, his voice low and controlled. "I was young and arrogant, convinced of my own invincibility. I led a patrol into territory I had been warned was dangerous. We were ambushed. Blackwood and 3 others died." His knuckles whitened around his glass. "I survived with nothing worse than this." He pulled back his sleeve to reveal a long scar running from wrist to elbow. "You cannot blame yourself for the fortunes of war," Sophia said. "Can I not?" His eyes met hers, intense and troubled. "I was their commanding officer. Their lives were my responsibility. I failed them through pride and recklessness." Understanding dawned on Sophia. "And now you keep everyone at a distance." The Duke stiffened. "I think you presume too much, Duchess." "Do I?" She leaned forward. "You maintain a perfect facade of control and indifference because you fear the consequences of caring too deeply again." He stood abruptly, moving back to the window. "It's late. You should retire." Sophia rose but didn't leave. "The man you were before India, the warm, idealistic man Lady Caroline described, he still exists, doesn't he? Beneath the cold exterior of the Duke of Westmore. That man died in India," he said flatly. "Good night, Duchess." This time Sophia recognized the dismissal for what it was. She moved to the door but paused on the threshold. "I do not believe he died, Your Grace," she said softly. "I believe he is merely lost, and perhaps, someday, he might be found again." She closed the door behind her, leaving the Duke alone with his demons and his whiskey. But as she walked back to her bedchamber, Sophia felt something she had not experienced since her wedding day, a flutter of hope. Behind the Duke's perfect facade lay a wounded man, and in his wounds she had glimpsed something unexpected, his humanity. Autumn came to London in a blaze of gold and crimson. The fashionable families began to depart for their country estates, and Sophia assumed she and the Duke would soon follow suit. To her surprise, he announced one morning over breakfast, a meal they now occasionally shared in silence, that he would be travelling to Hampshire alone. "You prefer to remain in town?" he asked, not looking up from his correspondence. "I had assumed we would journey to Westmore Park together," Sophia replied carefully. The Duke set down his letter, his expression unreadable. "I have business matters to attend to that would bore you excessively. It seemed kinder to spare you the tedium." "I see." Sophia sipped her tea, hiding her disappointment. Since the night in his study 3 weeks prior, there had been subtle shifts in their relationship. Not exactly warmth, but perhaps a lessening of coldness. They occasionally exchanged more than perfunctory conversation at dinner, and twice he had escorted her to the theatre, sitting beside her in the Westmore box without obvious reluctance. "Unless," he said suddenly, "you particularly wish to come." Sophia looked up, startled by the unexpected concession. "I would like to see Westmore Park. I've heard it's quite beautiful." Something that might have been satisfaction crossed his features. "Very well. We shall leave on Tuesday." The journey to Hampshire took most of a day, their carriage passing through increasingly rural landscapes as London receded behind them. Seated opposite her husband, Sophia watched the countryside unfold, rolling hills dotted with sheep, villages clustered around church spires, forests beginning to shed their summer greenery. "The estate has been in my family for 10 generations, the Duke said unexpectedly, breaking a silence that had lasted nearly an hour. Sophia turned from the window. "It must hold many memories for you." "Indeed." His expression softened slightly. "I spent most of my childhood there. London never felt like home in the same way." "And yet you spend the majority of your time in the city," Sophia observed. "Duty requires it." He straightened his cuffs, a gesture she had come to recognize as a sign of discomfort. "The business of the dukedom does not manage itself. Surely you could delegate some responsibilities." "Perhaps." He regarded her with newfound curiosity. "And what of you, Duchess? Do you prefer town or country?" The question, a personal one rather than practical, surprised her. "The country, I think. Beaufort Manor was modest compared to your estates, but I loved its gardens and the surrounding woods. As a girl, I would spend hours reading beneath an old oak tree by the stream." "You enjoy reading?" he asked, as if this were a novel concept. Sophia couldn't help but smile. "Is that so surprising? Women are permitted intellectual pursuits these days, Your Grace, even in the confines of marriage." To her astonishment, he returned her smile, a brief upturning of lips that transformed his stern features. "Forgive me. I did not mean to imply otherwise. What do you read?" "History, primarily. Poetry. Some novels, though my father considered them frivolous. The library at Westmore Park is extensive," he said. "You may find it to your liking." It was the closest thing to a personal kindness he had offered, and Sophia felt an unexpected warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you. I look forward to exploring it." Westmore Park appeared on the horizon as evening approached, a grand Palladian mansion of honey-colored stone, its windows catching the last golden rays of sunset. Formal gardens stretched before it, and beyond them a lake reflected the fading sky. "It's beautiful," Sophia whispered, as the carriage rolled up the elm-lined drive. The Duke glanced at her, seemingly pleased by her reaction. "Wait until you see it in morning light." The household staff, at least 30 strong, lined up to greet them, headed by Mr. Phillips, the butler, and Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper. They welcomed Sophia with genuine warmth, and she realized with some surprise that her arrival as the new Duchess had been anticipated with excitement rather than trepidation. "We've prepared the Duchess suite, Your Grace," Mrs. Winters told her as they climbed the grand staircase. "It has the finest views of the estate." The suite was magnificent. A sitting room, bedchamber, and dressing room decorated in shades of blue and gold. Fresh flowers filled crystal vases, and a fire crackled invitingly in the marble fireplace. "This was my mother's favorite room," the Duke said from the doorway, startling Sophia, who had not realized he had followed them. "It's lovely," she replied, running her fingers over the delicate silk brocade of a chair. "I'm honored to use it." Mrs. Winters excused herself, leaving them alone. For a moment, neither spoke. Then the Duke cleared his throat. "I thought perhaps, that is, if you are not too fatigued from the journey, you might join me for dinner in an hour." The hesitation in his voice, so unlike his usual commanding tone, touched something in Sophia. "I would like that very much." He nodded, something like relief crossing his features. "Until then, Duchess." Dinner was served in the smaller of the estate's 2 dining rooms, a room that could still comfortably seat 20, but felt almost intimate with just the 2 of them. The Duke, to Sophia's surprise, proved to be an attentive host, inquiring if the food met her approval and keeping their glasses filled with excellent wine. "Tell me about your childhood here," Sophia said, as they finished the main course. The Duke seemed taken aback by her interest, but after a moment began to speak. He told her of summers spent swimming in the lake, of learning to ride in the estate's paddocks, of hiding from his tutors in the maze of hedges beyond the rose garden. "You sound as though you were quite the handful," Sophia observed, smiling. "I was indeed. My father despaired of me ever becoming a proper heir." His expression clouded briefly. "He died when I was 15. The title came to me 3 years later when my grandfather passed." "So young," Sophia murmured. "It must have been a terrible burden." The Duke studied her face, as if searching for something. "It was challenging. But duty is duty." "Is that why you joined the army? To escape the burden for a time?" He set down his wineglass. "You are unusually perceptive, Duchess. Or perhaps you are not as inscrutable as you believe, Your Grace," she replied gently. A log shifted in the fireplace, sending sparks dancing up the chimney. Outside, rain had begun to fall, pattering against the tall windows. "My father wanted me to marry by 25, the Duke said suddenly, "to secure the succession, as he put it. I resisted, focusing instead on restoring certain neglected estate properties and investments." He paused. "When I reached 30 this year, I decided it was time to fulfill that final obligation." "And so you chose me," Sophia said, unable to keep a hint of bitterness from her voice. "A suitable bride from a good family, conveniently in need of financial rescue. I chose you because when we were introduced at Lady Melbourne's ball last winter, you were the only young woman who did not simper or flatter." His admission was unexpected. "You spoke intelligently about the exhibition at the Royal Academy. You showed no interest in my title or fortune. I found it refreshing." Sophia stared at him. "I had no idea you even remembered that conversation." "I remember more than you might think, Sophia." The use of her given name, spoken softly in the firelit room, created an intimacy that made her heart beat faster. For the first time, she allowed herself to truly look at him, not as the cold, distant Duke, but as a man. His strong features, the intensity of his grey eyes, the way his dark hair curled slightly at his temples. "Why did you tell me I would spend our wedding night alone?" she asked, the wine perhaps making her bolder than she would otherwise have been. "Was I so unappealing?" The Duke's expression darkened. "You misunderstand. It was never a matter of appeal." "Then what was it?" He stood abruptly, moving to the window to watch the rain. "I told you from the beginning, ours is a marriage of convenience. Nothing more. You said that, yes, but you never explained why." Sophia rose as well, approaching him cautiously. "Most men in your position would at least desire an heir." "I have a cousin who can inherit if necessary," he said stiffly. "That doesn't answer my question." He turned to face her, his expression guarded. "What would you have me say, Sophia? That I am incapable of the kind of emotional attachment that should exist between husband and wife? That I learned in India that caring deeply only leads to devastation? That I chose a marriage in name only because it seemed the kindest option for us both?" The raw honesty of his words stunned her. "Henry," she said, using his given name for the first time. "Not all attachments end in pain. In my experience, they do." His voice was low, almost a whisper. "I would not subject anyone to what I have become." "And what is that?" she asked gently. His laugh was bitter. "A man half alive, going through the motions of existence without truly living." Sophia reached out, hesitantly placing her hand on his arm. "Yet I see a man who cares deeply about his estates, his tenants, his responsibilities. A man troubled by the deaths of soldiers under his command years after the fact. Those are not the actions of someone half alive." He looked down at her hand on his sleeve, then slowly covered it with his own. The touch sent a shiver through her. "You have an unusual way of seeing things, Duchess," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Perhaps I simply see you more clearly than you see yourself." For a moment, they stood there, connected by that simple touch, the rain drumming against the windows and the fire crackling in the grate. Then the Duke stepped back, breaking the contact. "It grows late," he said, his voice once again controlled. "I have taken enough of your evening." Sophia felt the loss of the moment keenly but nodded. "Thank you for dinner, Henry, and for sharing your memories of this place." He escorted her to the base of the grand staircase, where they would part ways to their separate chambers. "Good night, Sophia." "Good night, Henry," she replied, then gathered her courage. "Perhaps tomorrow you might show me the grounds, if the weather clears, of course." He looked surprised, then pleased. "I would like that." As she climbed the stairs to her suite, Sophia felt a cautious hope taking root. Something had shifted between them tonight, a crack in the wall he had built around himself. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was a beginning. The next day dawned clear and bright, the rain having washed the world clean. True to his word, the Duke, Henry, as she was beginning to think of him, suggested a tour of the estate after breakfast. They spent the morning exploring the formal gardens, the glasshouses filled with exotic plants, and the stables where magnificent horses whickered softly in their stalls. "Do you ride?" Henry asked as they admired a dappled grey mare. "I do, though not as well as I would like," Sophia admitted. "We sold our horses when my father's finances became strained." "Then you must ride here," he said decisively. "This is Artemis. She has a gentle temperament, but spirit enough to be interesting. She would suit you, I think." The casual confidence with which he matched her to the horse touched Sophia. "You seem very certain of my abilities, considering you've never seen me ride." "I am a good judge of character, in horses and in people." His lips quirked in what was almost a smile. "Tomorrow, perhaps?" "I would like that very much." They continued their tour, walking down to the lake where swans glided across the still water. The October sun was warm on their faces, belying the approach of winter. "I spent hours here as a boy," Henry said, skipping a stone across the water with practiced ease. "My mother would bring a book and read while I fished or sailed my toy boats." "You were close to her?" Sophia asked, noticing how his expression softened when speaking of his mother. "Very. She died when I was 12. Consumption." He skipped another stone, watching it bounce 4 times before sinking. "My father withdrew into himself afterward. We were never close again." "I'm sorry," Sophia said quietly. "My mother died when I was 8. An influenza epidemic." Henry turned to her, his eyes reflecting genuine sympathy. "Then you understand." "Yes," she smiled sadly. "I do." He offered her his arm as they walked back toward the house, a gentlemanly gesture that felt significant in its normalcy. As they strolled through the woods, comfortable silence between them, Sophia realized that for the first time since their wedding, she felt like a true wife rather than an ornamental accessory. The days at Westmore Park fell into a pleasant rhythm. Mornings were spent riding, Henry patiently helping Sophia regain her confidence in the saddle. Afternoons found her in the magnificent library, losing herself in rare volumes, while occasionally glancing up to find her husband working at a desk nearby, attending to estate business. In the evenings they dined together, their conversations gradually becoming more personal, more meaningful. One afternoon, a week into their stay, Sophia was reading in the library when Henry entered, his expression troubled. "Is something wrong?" she asked, setting aside her book. "The tenant farmer has fallen ill," he explained. "His wife sent word asking if I might call. Apparently the local physician is away." "Of course you must go," Sophia said, rising. "Would you like me to accompany you? I have some knowledge of herbal remedies my mother taught me." Henry looked surprised by her offer. "It may be unpleasant. These are simple accommodations, not what you're accustomed to." "I'm hardly as delicate as you seem to believe," Sophia replied with a smile. "Besides, isn't it a duchess's duty to show concern for those under her care?" Something like admiration flickered in his eyes. "Indeed it is. Very well. I'll have the carriage brought around." The tenant's cottage lay at the edge of the estate, a modest structure with a thatched roof and small garden. Smoke curled from the chimney as their carriage approached. Henry helped Sophia descend, his hand lingering on hers a moment longer than necessary. A worried-looking woman greeted them at the door, curtsying deeply. "Your Grace, and her Grace too. Oh, you're too kind to come." "Mrs. Collins," Henry said warmly. "This is my wife, the Duchess. How is Robert faring?" "Poorly, Your Grace. The fever won't break, and his breathing's troubled." She led them inside to a small bedchamber, where a man lay beneath several blankets, his face flushed and sweating. Sophia approached without hesitation, placing a gentle hand on the farmer's forehead. "How long has he been this way?" "3 days, Your Grace," Mrs. Collins replied. "Started with a chill after he was caught in that downpour last week." Henry stood back, watching as Sophia questioned the woman about symptoms and treatments tried thus far. To his evident surprise, she then rolled up her sleeves and set to work, requesting hot water, clean cloths, and various items from the kitchen garden. "Pneumonia, I suspect," she told Henry quietly as Mrs. Collins hurried to fulfill her requests. "My mother treated many such cases among our tenants." For the next hour, Sophia worked steadily, preparing a mustard plaster for the man's chest, brewing a tea of thyme and honey for his throat, and showing Mrs. Collins how to position him to ease his labored breathing. "The fever should break by morning if we're fortunate," she explained to the grateful woman. "Continue with the tea every few hours. I'll send more herbs from the house and the physician will call when he returns." As they walked back to the carriage, Henry studied her with new eyes. "You never mentioned your medical knowledge." Sophia shrugged lightly. "You never asked about my interests or abilities." "A fair rebuke," he acknowledged. "You were remarkable in there. Most ladies of your station would have merely offered sympathy from a safe distance." "My mother believed that privilege carried responsibility," Sophia replied. "She taught me that true nobility lies in service to others, not in titles or wealth." Henry helped her into the carriage, then sat beside her rather than opposite. "A small but significant change. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. I think she would be proud of the daughter she raised." The compliment, sincerely offered, warmed Sophia more than she cared to admit. "Thank you." As the carriage rolled back toward the house, the autumn sunset painting the landscape in gold and amber, Henry's hand found hers on the seat between them. He did not speak, nor did she, but his fingers entwined with hers in a gesture more intimate than any words. That night at dinner, something had changed between them. The invisible wall that had separated them for months seemed to have developed significant cracks. Henry spoke more freely, even laughing at Sophia's gentle teasing about his competitive nature when they had played chess the previous evening. As they finished dessert, he surprised her with a question. "Would you play something on the pianoforte? Phillips mentioned you were practicing in the music room yesterday." Sophia felt her cheeks warm. "I'm rather out of practice, I'm afraid. We had to sell our instrument some years ago." "I would like to hear you play nonetheless," he said, his voice gentle. "Please." In the drawing room, Sophia seated herself at the magnificent pianoforte. After a moment's hesitation, she began to play a Chopin nocturne, her fingers finding the notes with increasing confidence. She lost herself in the music, and when she finished, she looked up to find Henry standing beside the instrument, his expression unguarded for once. "Beautiful," he said softly, and she was not certain whether he meant the music or something else entirely. The following days brought them closer still. They rode together each morning, Henry teaching Sophia to jump small hedges, his hands occasionally steadying her when necessary. They read in companionable silence in the library, sometimes sharing passages that particularly moved them. One rainy afternoon, he taught her to play billiards in the game room, standing behind her to guide her aim, his breath warm against her neck. Yet still, each night, they parted at the top of the stairs, retiring to separate chambers. 2 weeks into their stay, a letter arrived from London. Henry read it at breakfast, his expression darkening. "Troubling news?" Sophia inquired. "Captain Blackwood," he replied grimly. "He continues to make accusations against me in certain circles. Now he claims to have written evidence of my negligence in India." "Do such documents exist?" she asked carefully. Henry set down the letter. "No, but the damage to my reputation may be done regardless." "Then we must return to London and confront these falsehoods directly," Sophia said decisively. He looked at her with surprise. "We?" "Yes, we." She reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. "I am your wife, Henry. Your battles are mine as well." Something shifted in his expression, a softening, a surrender. "Sophia, He seemed to struggle for words. "You deserve better than to be drawn into this unpleasantness." "I deserve to stand beside my husband," she replied firmly, "especially when he is unjustly accused." He turned his hand beneath hers, clasping her fingers. "Very well. We shall return to London tomorrow." That evening, Sophia sat at her dressing table as Ellis brushed out her hair for the night. A knock at the door surprised them both. "Enter," Sophia called. The door opened to reveal Henry, still dressed though he had removed his cravat. "Forgive the intrusion," he said, his eyes meeting Sophia's in the mirror. "Might I have a word with you? Alone?" Ellis curtsied and departed discreetly. Henry remained by the door, seemingly uncertain, a stark contrast to his usual confident bearing. "Is something wrong?" Sophia asked, turning on her stool to face him. "No." He took a step into the room. "That is, I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For your support regarding Blackwood, for your compassion toward the tenants, for—" He hesitated. "For seeing in me something worth believing in, when I had long ago stopped believing in myself." Sophia stood, her heart pounding. "Henry, please let me finish." He moved closer. "I have treated you abominably these past months. I married you for convenience and denied you the respect, the consideration, the affection a wife deserves." "You were honest about your intentions from the beginning," Sophia said softly. "Honest, perhaps, but wrong." His voice was rough with emotion. "I told myself I was protecting you by keeping my distance. In truth, I was protecting myself from the possibility of caring too deeply and being wounded again." He took another step toward her, close enough now that she could see the flecks of silver in his grey eyes. "These weeks at Westmore Park have shown me what a fool I've been," he continued. "You are extraordinary, Sophia, intelligent, compassionate, strong. I find myself captivated by you." Sophia's breath caught. "Henry, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that I no longer wish for a marriage in name only." He reached out, tentatively touching her cheek. "I'm saying that I want a true marriage, in every sense, if you would consider it." "Consider it?" Sophia echoed, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "I understand if you cannot forgive my coldness," he said quickly. "If you prefer to maintain our current arrangement." Sophia silenced him by placing her fingers against his lips. "Henry," she whispered, "I have wanted a true marriage since the day we wed." His eyes darkened with emotion. Slowly, giving her every chance to withdraw, he lowered his head and kissed her. Unlike the brief, formal touch of their wedding day, this kiss was tender, questioning, then increasingly passionate as Sophia responded, her arms winding around his neck. When they finally drew apart, both breathless, Henry rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me tonight," he murmured. "Not because duty demands it, but because we both desire it." "Yes," Sophia answered simply, and took his hand. London in November was a different city than the one they had left, shrouded in fog, the streets glistening with rain, the social season in abeyance as Parliament sat. Westmore House, however, felt different to Sophia. No longer a gilded cage, but a home, warmed by the remarkable change in her relationship with Henry. They had returned as true husband and wife in every sense, their newfound intimacy transforming both their private and public lives. Henry still attended to his duties in the House of Lords and his business affairs, but now he consulted Sophia on matters of importance, valuing her perspective. She, in turn, had begun to take a more active role as Duchess, championing causes close to her heart, particularly the improvement of conditions for women and children in London's poorest parishes. The matter of Captain Blackwood, however, remained a shadow over their happiness. The day after their return, Henry had received a formal demand from the captain's solicitors, requesting a substantial payment to prevent the publication of certain documents relating to the incident at Jaunpur. "This is nothing short of blackmail," Sophia declared, reading the letter over Henry's shoulder in his study. "Indeed." Henry's jaw tightened. "Yet if he truly possesses such documents, however fabricated they might be, the damage to my reputation could be considerable." "Do you believe he has them?" Henry sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's possible. There was an inquiry after the ambush. Statements were taken from surviving officers. If Blackwood obtained copies and is willing to present them selectively, out of context, then we must face this directly," Sophia said firmly. "Invite him here." Henry looked at her in surprise. "Here? To our home?" "Yes." Sophia's expression was resolute. "Let him make his accusations to your face, not through intermediaries. I believe a man consumed by bitterness as he is might reveal the truth if confronted directly." "It could be unpleasant," Henry warned. Sophia took his hand. "We have faced worse together." 2 days later, Captain Thomas Blackwood was shown into the Duke's study. He appeared sober but dishevelled, his uniform jacket frayed at the cuffs, his eyes bearing the haunted look of a man consumed by grief and anger. He seemed startled to find Sophia present, seated beside Henry behind the massive oak desk. "Your Grace," he said stiffly, bowing to Henry before acknowledging Sophia with a cursory nod. "I was not expecting an audience." "The Duchess is my partner in all matters," Henry replied, his voice cool. "You may speak freely before her." Blackwood's lip curled. How convenient to hide behind a woman's skirts. "You mistake my husband's character entirely, Captain," Sophia said calmly. "The Duke conceals nothing. It is you who deal in shadows and threats." The captain flushed. "I seek only justice for my brother." "By attempting to extort money from his Grace," Sophia challenged. "That is not justice, sir. That is vengeance." "Enough," Henry said quietly. "Captain Blackwood, you claim to possess documents regarding Jaunpur. I would see them." The captain reached into his coat and withdrew a folded sheaf of papers. "Here, copies of the inquiry statements, including your own admission that you dismissed intelligence reports of rebel activity in the area." Henry took the documents, scanning them quickly. His expression remained impassive, but Sophia, who had come to know him so well, detected the slight tightening around his eyes that indicated distress. "These are selectively copied," he said finally. "You've omitted key portions of the testimony." "I've included what matters," Blackwood retorted. "You knew the danger and led those men into it regardless. My brother trusted you." Henry set the papers down carefully. "Yes, he did, as did every man under my command, and I have carried the weight of their deaths every day since." The raw honesty in his voice seemed to catch Blackwood off guard. For a moment his hostile expression faltered. "Captain," Sophia interjected gently, "may I ask how old you were when your brother died?" The question seemed to surprise him. 17, Your Grace." "And he was your only family?" Blackwood swallowed hard. "Our parents died when we were boys. James raised me, gave up his own opportunities to ensure I received an education, a commission." "He sounds like an honorable man," Sophia said. "The best of men," Blackwood agreed, his voice rough with emotion. "And he died face down in the mud because of him." He jabbed a finger toward Henry. Henry stood slowly. "James Blackwood was indeed an honorable man, the finest officer under my command. When the ambush began, he could have retreated to safety. Instead, he stayed to help the wounded. His last act was to drag Private Collins to cover, saving the boy's life at the cost of his own." The captain stared at him. "How do you know this?" The official report details the facts of the ambush," Henry interrupted. "It does not speak to the courage of the men who died there. I know what your brother did because I was there, Captain. I saw his bravery with my own eyes." He moved to a cabinet, unlocked it and withdrew a small wooden box. From it he removed a medal on a faded ribbon. "This was awarded to Lieutenant Blackwood posthumously. The notification was sent to your regiment, but you had already resigned your commission by then." He held it out. "It belongs to you now as his family." Blackwood made no move to take it. "A medal doesn't bring him back." "No," Henry agreed quietly. "Nothing can do that. I cannot change what happened at Jaunpur, Captain. I can only acknowledge my responsibility and try to live a life worthy of the men who died under my command, including my brother, especially your brother." Henry placed the medal on the desk between them. "You have every right to hate me, but using your brother's memory as a weapon dishonors him and the sacrifice he made." For a long moment, Blackwood stood motionless. Then, with a trembling hand, he reached for the medal, his fingers closing around it. "He wrote to me about you," he said finally, his voice barely audible. "Said you were different from other officers, that you cared for your men." He looked up, his eyes wet. "I couldn't reconcile that with what happened." "Grief often seeks a target," Sophia said gently. "It's easier to blame than to accept the senselessness of loss." Blackwood nodded slowly, then straightened his shoulders. "The documents," he said, gesturing to the papers on the desk. "They're the only copies. I never intended to publish them, not really. I needed someone to acknowledge what happened, what was lost." Henry extended his hand. "Lieutenant James Blackwood will not be forgotten, Captain. You have my word on that." After a moment's hesitation, Blackwood took the offered hand. "Thank you, Your Grace." He turned to Sophia. And you, Your Grace, for your understanding." When the captain had gone, Sophia moved to Henry's side. He stood by the window, looking out at the grey London sky, his expression pensive. "Are you all right?" she asked softly. He turned to her, his eyes filled with a mixture of relief and lingering sadness. "Thanks to you, I believe I am." He took her hands in his. "You were right to confront him directly. How did you know it would work?" "Because I've come to know you," Sophia replied simply. "The real you, beneath the Duke's facade. And I believe that if Captain Blackwood saw that man, the man his brother trusted, he might find the peace he seeks." Henry drew her into his arms, holding her close. "You see me more clearly than I see myself, Sophia. You always have." "That's what love does," she whispered against his chest. "It sees the truth of a person, even when they cannot." He pulled back slightly to look into her eyes. "Love," he repeated, as if testing the word. "Is that what this is between us?" Sophia smiled up at him. "What else would you call it?" "I've never said those words to anyone," he admitted. "Not since my mother died." "You don't need to say them," Sophia assured him. "I can see them in your actions, in your eyes." Henry cradled her face in his hands. "No, I think I do need to say them. You deserve to hear them." He took a deep breath. "I love you, Sophia, with a depth that terrifies and exhilarates me in equal measure." Joy bloomed in her chest, warm and radiant. "And I love you, Henry. I think perhaps I have since that first dinner at Westmore Park, when you showed me the man behind the Duke." Their kiss was tender, a promise and a celebration all at once. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Sophia's life. Their marriage, once a cold arrangement of convenience, had blossomed into a true partnership, founded on mutual respect, shared purpose, and deep affection. They entertained together, Henry proudly introducing Sophia to his political associates as "my brilliant wife," soliciting her opinions on matters of policy and reform. They attended the theatre and concerts, no longer sitting in rigid formality, but leaning close to share observations, her hand often tucked in his. And at night, they retired together to chambers now connected by a door that remained permanently open, their passion for each other deepening with each passing day. As Christmas approached, Henry suggested they return to Westmore Park for the holiday. "The estate is particularly beautiful in winter," he told her, "and I thought we might invite your father to join us." Sophia, touched by his thoughtfulness, threw her arms around him. "He would love that. He's been so lonely since I married." "Then it's settled. We'll make it a true family Christmas." The morning of their departure, Sophia awoke feeling unusually unwell. The slight nausea had plagued her for several days, but she had attributed it to the rich food served at the many holiday gatherings they had attended. "Perhaps we should delay our journey," Henry suggested, concerned by her pallor as she picked at her breakfast. "I can send for Dr. Barrett." "Nonsense," Sophia insisted. "It's merely a passing indisposition. The country air will do me good." By the time they reached Westmore Park that evening, however, her discomfort had increased. She retired early, Henry hovering anxiously until she shooed him away with assurances that a good night's sleep was all she needed. The next morning brought clarity. As her maid Ellis helped her dress, Sophia made a simple calculation and felt her heart skip a beat. "Ellis," she said carefully, "please ask His Grace if he might join me in my sitting room before breakfast." When Henry arrived, his expression concerned, Sophia dismissed the maid with a meaningful look. "Are you still unwell?" he asked, crossing to take her hands. "I've sent for Dr. Mitchell from the village." Sophia shook her head, a small smile playing at her lips. "I don't believe a doctor is necessary, though his confirmation would be welcome." Henry's brow furrowed. "I don't understand." She guided his hand to rest against her still flat stomach. "I believe, Your Grace, that the Westmore succession is now assured." For a moment he stared at her in confusion. Then understanding dawned, his eyes widening. "Sophia, are you saying—" "Yes," she whispered, her eyes shining with joy. "If my calculations are correct, we will welcome our child in early summer." Henry's face transformed, wonder replacing concern. Then, to Sophia's surprise, he sank to his knees before her, pressing his face against the fabric of her gown, his arms encircling her waist. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion, "for this gift, for everything." She stroked his hair, her own eyes filling with tears of happiness. "It is I who should thank you, Henry, for opening your heart to me, for showing me what true love can be." He looked up at her, his expression radiant. "When I told you on our wedding night that you would spend it alone, I thought I was protecting us both from disappointment. I never imagined then that you would become my everything, my partner, my conscience, my heart." Rising to his feet, he gathered her in his arms. "I promise you, Sophia, that our child will never know the coldness I once embraced. He or she will be raised with love, with warmth, with the knowledge that they are treasured beyond measure." "By both of us," Sophia agreed, resting her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Together." Outside, snow began to fall, dusting the formal gardens of Westmore Park with white. Inside, a Duke and Duchess stood by the window, arms entwined, watching the transformation of the landscape. But the greater transformation was within them. Two wounded souls who had found in each other not just healing, but joy. Not just companionship, but completion. The most desired Duke in London had indeed told his bride she would spend their wedding night alone. But in the end, he had given her something far more precious than his presence that night. He had given her his heart, completely and without reservation. And in the warmth of that love, both their lives were forever changed. The end. Dear listener, as the final notes of our story fade away, perhaps you find yourself lingering in the warmth of Henry and Sophia's journey, a tale of walls broken down and hearts redeemed. Their story, though set amidst the grandeur of Victorian England, speaks to timeless truths that echo in our own lives today. How many of us, like Henry, have built walls around our hearts, believing that vulnerability leads only to pain? How many times have we chosen the safety of isolation over the risk of true connection? The Duke's journey reminds us that our deepest wounds often become our greatest barriers to love, yet also our greatest opportunity for healing. And in Sophia, we see the quiet strength that comes not from dominance or control, but from patience, empathy, and unwavering belief in another's capacity to change. She teaches us that sometimes loving someone means seeing not just who they are, but who they could become if only they dared to believe it themselves. Life, like this story, rarely offers us perfect beginnings. We often find ourselves in circumstances not of our choosing, facing challenges that seem insurmountable. Yet within these very challenges lie the seeds of our transformation. Just as a marriage of convenience became a union of profound love, our own difficulties can become the foundation for unexpected joy. As you return to your own world, perhaps less adorned with titles and estates but no less complex in its emotions, remember that hearts, even those long closed, can open again. Wounds, even those deeply buried, can heal. And love, even when it seems impossible, can find its way through the smallest cracks in our defenses. Tonight, as you close your eyes to sleep, know that you carry within you the same capacity for renewal that transformed our Duke and Duchess. Whatever walls surround your heart, whatever battles you face tomorrow, you possess the strength to overcome them. Let this story be a gentle reminder that even in your darkest moments, the possibility of light remains. May you rest in peaceful slumber, protected by the knowledge that transformation is always possible and that love in its many forms remains the most powerful force for healing in our world. And when morning comes, may you face the day with renewed courage, knowing that your own story, like all great tales, is still being written. Sleep well, dream sweetly, and remember that you are never truly alone on your journey. Some people hear their own inner voices with great clearness, and they live by what they hear. Such people become crazies or they become legend. Thank you for listening, with the most sincere wishes for your heart and soul. Legends of the Fall. If you felt moved by this tale, please consider subscribing to our channel, liking this video, leaving a kind comment and sharing it with someone who might need a little hope today. Your support means the world to us, and from the bottom of our hearts it inspires us to keep telling stories full of love, redemption, and emotional twists. At the end of this video, another suggested story from our channel will appear. Click on it and be surprised by yet another unforgettable journey.